He was shot in the back. That is the first fact. Not the last fact, not the most complicated fact, but the one that sits at the center of everything that follows. On May 28, 2023, a 14-year-old boy named Cyrus Carmack-Belton was running away from a gas station in Columbia, South Carolina, when a .45 caliber Glock bullet entered his body from behind. He was running away. The shot came from behind. He was 14 years old. He was pronounced dead at the scene. The man who fired the shot was Rick Chow, 58 years old at the time, the owner of an Express Mart Shell gas station on Park Lane Road in the Richland County area of Columbia. His reason for chasing the teenager was the belief that Cyrus had stolen water bottles from his store. The surveillance footage inside that store told a different story entirely. This is 911 crime. Every source used in this video is linked in the description below. Check it yourself. That is how this channel works. Before we walk through what the cameras captured, what investigators found, what 3 years of legal proceedings have produced, and what a jury is now deliberating in a Richland County courtroom, I want to tell you who Cyrus Carmack-Belton was. Because this case has a way of becoming about legal arguments and surveillance angles and stand-your-ground statutes, and in the middle of all of that, the person who was actually killed can disappear from the story. Cyrus Carmack-Belton was 14 years old. He was a student at Summit Parkway Middle School in Columbia, South Carolina, where he was remembered by his school as a young man who had a presence in his community. He had people who loved him. He had a mother who, when she stood before a judge 3 years later and listened to arguments about immunity and self-defense law, used a phrase that became one of the most quoted lines in this entire case. "He hunted my son down." That is how Cyrus's mother described what happened on the evening of May 28, 2023. Not a confrontation, not a mutual escalation. Hunt. And when you walk through the timeline of what the cameras recorded and what investigators found at the scene, her words are difficult to argue with. It was Memorial Day weekend. A Sunday evening, Cyrus entered the Express Mart Shell station on Park Lane Road at approximately 8 o'clock at night. What happened next inside that store was recorded on multiple surveillance cameras from multiple angles. And 3 years later, on May 28, 2026, exactly 3 years to the day after Cyrus was killed, jurors in Rick Chow's murder trial sat in a courtroom and watched that footage for themselves. What the cameras showed: Cyrus picked up 4 bottles of water. He put each one back. He did not take them. He did not leave the store with them. The surveillance footage, reviewed by investigators from the Richland County Sheriff's Department, showed no evidence that Cyrus had stolen anything. Richland County Sheriff Leon Lott stood in front of cameras the day after the shooting and said it plainly. His words were direct, and they became the anchor of everything that followed. He did not shoplift anything. We have no evidence that he stole anything whatsoever, but before any of that was confirmed, before the footage had been fully reviewed, an argument broke out inside the store between Cyrus, Rick Chow's son Andy Chow, and Rick Chow's wife Alice. The nature of that argument is part of the trial record. What is not in dispute is what happened. Next, Cyrus left the store. He took off running. And Rick Chow and his son Andy followed him outside and began to chase him. The chase covered more than 130 yards. 130 yards, more than the length of a football field. Down Springtree Road, away from the gas station, away from the property that Chow had any legal claim to protect. A 58-year-old man and his son chasing a 14-year-old boy down a public road in the evening on Memorial Day weekend in a residential area of Columbia, South Carolina. At some point during that chase, Cyrus fell. Andy Chow caught up to him, and what Andy Chow says happened in that moment is the fulcrum on which his father's entire defense rests. Andy Chow testified in court that when Cyrus fell and he reached him, Cyrus had a gun, and that Cyrus pointed that gun directly at Andy's face. Andy Chow told the jury he believed he would have died that day if his father had not pulled the trigger. He said he heard his father yell, "Drop it," twice. He said Cyrus said no, and then Rick Chow fired once. Prosecutors do not dispute that Cyrus had a firearm on him that evening. That detail is in the record. What prosecutors dispute is whether what happened next was legally justified self-defense or whether it was a murder committed by a man who chased a child he had falsely accused of stealing down a public road and shot him in the back because the shot entered Cyrus Carmack-Belton from behind, not from the front, where Andy Chow claimed the gun was being pointed. From behind. And a shot in the back is the physical record of a body that was moving away, not advancing. Prosecutor Chadwick Gibson addressed this in his opening statement with words that cut through every legal technicality in the case and landed directly on the human reality of what happened. On May 28, 2023, Gibson told the jury, Cheeky Rick Chow determined that Cyrus Carmack-Belton's life was worth less than 4 bottles of water. He then asked the jury to hold one sequence of events in their minds simultaneously: a false accusation, a 130-yard chase by an armed adult, a shot in the back, and a claim of self-defense. In what world, Gibson said, do you get to falsely accuse a 14-year-old of stealing, chase a 14-year-old 130-plus yards down a road while you're armed with a pistol, shoot that person in the back, then claim you're defending your son? The defense's response was delivered by attorney Jack Swerling, who began his opening statement by asking the jury to focus on a different detail. Why, Swerling asked, was a 14-year-old boy carrying a semi-automatic pistol equipped with a laser sight on a Sunday evening in Columbia, South Carolina? If Cyrus had not had that weapon, Swerling argued, none of what followed would have happened. Andy Chow would not have seen a gun. Rick Chow would not have fired. The defense's position is that Rick Chow acted in defense of his son in a moment of genuine fear, and that the outcome was legally justified, under the circumstances as Andy Chow experienced them. That is the argument the jury is now weighing. But there is a layer of this case that the jury never heard, and understanding what that evidence is essential to understanding the full picture of who Rick Chow is and how he operated his business. Rick Chow had fired his weapon at customers before, twice. In May 2015, a woman left his store with beer and boiled peanuts without paying. There was a struggle outside. She got in her car to leave. Rick Chow pulled out his .45 caliber Glock and fired approximately 6 times at the passenger side window of her moving vehicle. No one was injured. No charges were filed. In October 2018, a shoplifter took a $6.49 can of oven cleaner and hid it in his clothing. Rick Chow shot him. The shoplifter survived. Chow was not charged because investigators determined the conduct did not meet the legal requirements for criminal charges under South Carolina law at the time. Over the preceding 5 years, law enforcement had responded to hundreds of calls at Rick Chow's Express Mart Shell Station: assaults, larcenies, shoplifting, vandalism, robbery, burglary. The store existed in a difficult environment, and Chow had his own history of responding to that environment with his firearm. The Richland County Sheriff's Department had, in fact, taken what prosecutors described as the extraordinary step of inviting Chow in specifically to discuss the legal limits of his use of force. He was told explicitly where the line was. None of that information reached the jury. Judge Heath Taylor ruled that Chow's prior incidents with law enforcement were suppressed, and that jurors would not hear about them unless the defense opened that door themselves by claiming Chow had no prior contact with deputies. The defense did not open that door. So the jury, deliberating in Richland County right now, is weighing a murder charge without knowing that the man who fired the shot had done it before and had been specifically counseled about when lethal force is and is not legal. Rick Chow chose not to testify. In his own defense, that is his constitutional right, and the jury was instructed not to hold it against him. His son Andy testified in his place, providing the only first-hand account of the moments before the shot was fired. Andy Chow's cross-examination was intense. The prosecutor asked a direct question that became the defining exchange of the defense's case. Would the shooting have happened if everyone had stayed inside the gas station? Andy Chow did not have a clean answer to that question, because the answer on its face is no. The shooting happens on a public road more than 130 yards from the store because two people followed a 14-year-old boy out the door and down the street. Staying inside the gas station was always an option. It was never chosen. The stand your ground motion was the first major legal hurdle. In November 2025, after a two-day hearing, Judge Scott Sprouse denied Rick Chow immunity under South Carolina's Stand Your Ground law. The judge reviewed this surveillance footage showing Cyrus leaving the store and the Chows following him outside, reviewed the physical evidence at the scene. He reviewed the evidence about the chase, and he ruled that the evidence did not support a self-defense claim under Stand Your Ground. That ruling kept the case alive and sent it to trial. The defense had also sought to move the trial out of Richland County, arguing that pre-trial publicity had made it impossible to find an impartial jury. That request was denied. Attorney Jack Swirling told the judge he rarely makes that request, but that this case was different. The killing had sent what one news organization described as waves of anguish and grief through the African-American community in Richland County, where nearly half the population is black. Cyrus Carmack-Belton was black. Rick Chow is Asian. The case was covered extensively in local and national media from the night of the shooting. Selecting an impartial jury in that environment required hours of careful screening, and it produced the panel now deliberating his fate. On the night Cyrus was shot, the community's response was immediate. On Maui, crowd gathered outside the Express Mart the following day. Protests took place. Signs appeared on the building's windows. No child deserves to die over water. Close it down. At 9:43 that night, the store was broken into and items were taken from the shelves. Cyrus's name was spray painted on the building. Inside, shelves were knocked down. 3 years later, that same community is waiting for a verdict. Closing arguments in the Rick Chow murder trial are scheduled for today. The jury has been given the case. The same jury that watched surveillance footage of Cyrus picking up 4 water bottles and putting each one back. The same jury that heard a prosecutor ask, in what world a false accusation, a 130-yard chase, and a shot in the back constitutes legal self-defense. The same jury that heard Andy Chow testify that his father saved his life. The same jury that will never hear about the two. Other times Rick Chow pointed his .45 caliber Glock at people who were leaving his store. Cyrus Carmack-Belton was 14 years old. He was a student at Summit Parkway Middle School. He was on a public road on Memorial Day weekend, running away from a man who had falsely accused him of stealing when he was shot in the back with a .45 caliber Glock pistol. His mother said he was hunted down. The jury will decide what the law calls it. When that verdict comes, 911 crime will be here. Every verified fact, every confirmed source used in this video is in the description below. Check it, share it. This is 911 crime.